Mother of God! It's Sunday night. Line of Duty is on the television in the other room. And since I don't watch Line of Duty, I'm going to pull a double header today and I'm going to do a second episode, this time talking about New Order's Republic. So that makes this episode 84 of Mark Talks about every bloody record and album that he owns. And it's going to be a goodie, I think. I don't want to do myself up and sound like I'm, Mr. Bloody Amazing, but I've had a lot of thoughts about this album over the past few weeks. And we're coming up now to the 28th anniversary of the release of the Republic album, which is pretty amazing, actually. I remember sitting in the Burger King in Leicester with my girlfriend, having bought a copy of this very CD, in fact, from Rockaboom Records in Leicester. £11.99 it cost me. It was a good investment. It's worked out at something like around about 40 pence per year since then. It's given me definitely more than 40 pence worth of joy. I remember sitting in the Burger King on the Wednesday after it came out, and I held this very CD in my hands, and I went, that is the last New Order album. That is the last New Order album I'm ever going to hear. And I was wrong. But for a long time, I was right. And this album has a really long and tortured history. And I'd like to thank the respective members of the bands that have written books. Bernard, Stephen, and as ever, Peter Hook, for laying clear their opinions around this album, which is widely regarded as the difficult period for New Order. It's also widely regarded as, I think, one of their worst albums, and I think that's really, really unfair. I think Republic is a really super, super strong album, but it's a very unusual record in that it's New Order and it doesn't sound like New Order. It's got a kind of air of exhausted melancholy around it, almost a despair, which the band never have captured on any of their other albums or releases ever. It just really sounds almost like a desolate version of New Order. And the reason being, of course, is that New Order split up after the recording of Technique and the tour. Their last live show for 4 years was at the Reading Festival in August 1989, and then they didn't play again until they played Dublin in May 1993, and an awful lot happened. The last episode, which I did where I talked about New Order solo projects between 1989 and 1992, kind of goes into that in detail. But effectively, come late 1991, early 1992, there was pressure on the band to go back into the studio and record and release a new record, because Factory Records could tell that it was getting into trouble. And one of the strange things, and the worst thing that ever happened to New Order, I think, was probably getting involved in the huge money pit and dumpster fire that was the Hacienda. According to Peter Hook's book, in 1995, he was spending £7,000 a month out of his New Order earnings in order to keep the Hacienda open. And if the band had, I think, let go of the Hacienda, had let go of the idea of having a nightclub in Manchester, I think things would be a lot healthier for everybody involved. So we have to go back a little to talk through the recording of the album. The album was recorded at 2 studios, according to the inner sleeve here. Real World Studios in Bath, which I think is owned by Peter Gabriel, or was at the time, and Rack, wherever that is. And on the first day that the band got back together, they decided to do some initial pre-work before Bernard Sumner had finished his final bits of electronic activity. So Stephen, Gillian and Peter went into the studio and recorded some instrumental demos. They had about 2.5 songs. The first song that they recorded was called Regret, although it wasn't called Regret at that point. And Stephen was so pleased with that he ran off a cassette off the machine and kept it at home. When the band got back together, the first time that Bernard was part of the new unit, he went, we've got this great song that we recorded the other week, listen to it, turn the machine on, and all of the master tapes, all of the original recordings, the first recordings by New Order in 4 years had been wiped because the machine stopped working. Of course, for all the answers as to the reasons why and wherefore you should buy this very good hardback or paperback book called Fast Forward, written by a man called Stephen Morris, who plays drums in a band called New Order. And I think the situation around that was Factory clearly knew that they were running out of money. As a label, they were about to go under. Their cash flow had been terrible. Their management financially had been very poor. They were throwing lots of money at the Hacienda to keep that afloat in order to provide Manchester with a nightclub. And Factory made some terrible business deals. So one, for example, is that I think they wanted to get a loan for a building, and because of they couldn't prove their financial worth and equity, the accountants looked at their books and went, we can't give you a loan because you're not financially strong enough to do so. So they got what's called a bridging loan. And the bridging loan came at, I think, a rate of interest that was twice what an average mortgage would have been. In fact, probably sometimes more. So the band were paying, or more correctly, Factory were paying more than twice the market average for the bridging loan for their new headquarters, at the same point that both the Happy Mondays and New Order were in the studio recording new material. And obviously grunge had risen like a phoenix from the ashes of shit spandex hair metal. So the band had no real leverage in that respect. I mean, the facts and figures and the jargon all added up to just one thing. Factory were completely fucked, and New Order could end up fucked too, unless we, at this point, it all got legalese again, and I usually went back to the toilet to throw up again. And after finishing the albums, Republican, the other two, and You, and with our nerves shredded, we decided we were going to go on holiday, but the faxes would not stop. So the recording of Republic was pretty fraught. There's a huge sword of Damocles hanging over the heads of the band, and that is that this album has got to be a hit, otherwise your record label is going to go under, and your nightclub is going to go under, and you're probably on the hook for all the money as well. And I think Stephen described it as it was the first time when it felt like we were doing this as a job, which is pretty hard. Surely people become musicians so that they don't have to have a job, and so they don't have to be answerable to bosses or anything like that. There was also the matter of outstanding royalties. Rumour has it that Bernard was owed some money from the electronic royalties, because Revenge had lost some money and Factory were losing money hand over fist. And so he was, at that point, Electronic already left to go to EMI in May 1992. So they were already leaving the sinking ship, primarily because they had a promise of, well, you'll get an advance, and perhaps maybe it was even thought of as, well, Factory owe us the royalties, and if we sign to EMI, we'll get the royalties as an advance, as opposed to not getting the royalties at all from Factory. All got very, very complicated. And, of course, as I will mention, Peter Hook has strong opinions about that. So the band went into the studio to record Republic. And I think it's fair to say this was the first time that the band had really felt fragmented where they were recording. According to everything that's in the various books, it wasn't the case where the band were 4 people together in a room playing the songs live and recording those performances to tape, unlike other versions. It was almost an album that was assembled by committee. And when you listen to Republic, it's got, as I've said earlier, it's got a very, very strange, desolate, melancholy air around it, a sense of almost stubborn defeat, really, where the band are trying to make a record because they've got to make a record, and yet somehow the record that they're making is one that feels like it's a contractual obligation, but it doesn't sound like a contractual obligation. Clearly, the band tried their best to make a good record, although they didn't stick the landing particularly well, as I'll explain. The other thing was that the various musical parts which Stephen, Gillian, and Hookie were writing, allowing then Bernard in another studio to go and add guitar parts and vocals and to move bits around and so on and so forth. Bernard apparently was being quite stubborn about that and saying that the parts that he was being given by the rest of the band he didn't like or he didn't enjoy, and he thought maybe that there's a chorus that he could work with, but perhaps they might need to write a new verse or a new intro or something like that. And it all became very, very fragmented, really. And as I understand it, according to Peter Hook's book, the structure of the band financially changed at this point as well. So instead of it being a 25% split amongst the four members, it was moved to 50% to Bernard and 16.6% to the other members of the band. Again, how true that is, I don't know, but presumably Peter Hook's lawyers approved that, so there's some fact in there at all. And this is kind of how bands start to fragment and fall to pieces, is that one member of the band feels that they're either not treated fairly, or they're doing too much work, or they're not being compensated adequately for the work that they are putting in. And I remember that there was an interview that Peter Hook gave. He's given many interviews, when he was talking with Thomas Dolby. And when he told Thomas Dolby that he'd left New Order, which he did, Thomas Dolby said, "Let me guess, money and power," which is pretty much the reason why every band splits up. And so the idea being, and you can kind of very clearly pick out this feeling from Hooky in here, is that the band were just dysfunctional, and they were making an album because they had to, and it's probably a really difficult position to be in if none of you wants to be there and you want to be at work, and or more correctly, it feels like it's work. But what we've got with Republic, and this is where I kind of said before, is it's the album that sounds least like New Order. There's one absolute classic on there in the shape of Regrets. The other tracks on there, some of them are really good, but they don't sound like New Order tracks. They sound like it's for musicians that are clearly not necessarily working as well or as successfully as they've done previously, and pulling in different directions. I think one of the things that always made New Order sound like New Order was the sense in New Order that the biggest single guiding factor in New Order was compromise. I think Rob Gretton said that there is no band that compromises more than New Order, and that finds that in that space where all of them can accept it is perhaps where they're playing to each of their strengths. Whereas in this album there was less compromise. I think Bernard was pushing in one direction, Hooky in another, Stephen and Gillian were trying to contribute, but for some reason Bernard felt that their contributions, that is everyone but him, weren't necessarily up to the standard that he was expecting or hoping for. And so what we've got is an album that's made by committee. It kind of looks like a Photoshop. When you listen to it, there's individual parts of individual songs, bridge, choruses, and you could kind of go, okay, so it's actually an album where they've actually written 40 pieces of music, and they've got 3 pieces of music that they stick in each of the songs, each of the 10, 11 songs that are on the album. And really, where the choruses sit, the choruses could have been interchangeable. They'd be listening to maybe keyboard lines and going, would we try these keyboard lines over a different song? And also the other thing is the dynamics. So there's no sense that this is a record that's been made by 4 people that are sitting together in a room who like each other, who are playing the music. So the rhythms are very kind of one-dimensional. I think a huge chunk of the organic side of New Order, that is the bass and the drums and the guitar. The bass and the drums don't necessarily sound like Peter Hook and Stephen Morris. There's an additional percussionist who's credited on the album. Some of the tracks are probably either Stephen playing to drum machine patterns, which Bernard has programmed, or are drum machine patterns. World, for example, is a good example of that. And some of the other songs, again, Peter Hook's bass is barely on this album, so from going almost to be a lead guitar, is you've probably got about 13-14 minutes of lead bass that's audible on this album, and the album runs 46 minutes. There is less bass on Republic than there is on any other New Order album. And I was a member of the New Order ceremony mailing list in the late 90s, and also the New Order online forums, and someone's actually timed out how long you can hear Peter Hook's bass on this album, and as I've said, it's about 13-14 minutes across 46 minutes. So there's huge chunks, huge songs where Peter Hook doesn't play. He says he barely appears on Young Offender, and he doesn't appear on World at all. Although the melody line for World, the vocal melody for line is built for World is built upon Peter Hook's original bass recordings for the song, but then have been turned into vocals. So it's a strange, weird Franken album that captures, as I said, an air of stubborn defeat. You know, that the band have given their all to try and make a record, even though, frankly speaking, there probably shouldn't have been a New Order at this point. And this is the result that they came up with. And some of the songs on it are very good, and some of the songs on it aren't so good. I think probably Liar and Liar's probably the worst New Order song on an album, actually. And you know, coming from somebody that's bought a record that by New Order that's got the track Ecstasy and Ultraviolence on, that's a pretty big thing for me to say. There were 4 singles from this album. I'm going to talk through those singles whilst I also pick up the album as a whole. So the first track, first release as a single, first time anybody heard anything new by New Order, was Regret. If you don't know this, it's probably the singular best New Order song that there is, and it's probably their best single. It came in a multitude of formats, of which I only have 2, which is frankly a shocking state of affairs. I have the CD single and the 12-inch single, and they've got different tracks on, by the way. So the CD single has the New Order mix, the 7-inch version, and the Fire Island and Junior dub versions. And the Fire Island and Junior dub versions are by a remix pair called Fairley and Heller. Did a lot of remixes for Junior Boyzone. Remix engineer Gary Wilkinson. I used to work with the Gary Wilkinson. Maybe it's the same chap, but probably not. And then the extra tracks on the 12-inch, not issued on CD apart from in France, are the Sabres of Paradise, Slow and Low, and Fast and Throb mixes by the much missed Andy Weatherall. These remixes are unamazing, although the Fire Island mix is quite good. The New Order mix, which is on the CD single, it's also on the 7-inch single, is phenomenally good, and it's an alternative New Order recording. Now, what I'm going to say actually at this point is that if you look very, very closely at this CD here, you can see some flaking and some bronzing. There is a phenomenon called CD rot, which affects a number of CD singles released during this period, which is infuriating, and I will talk about that later on. In the run-up to the release of the Republic album, a couple of promo CDs were released. This is an American version, the New Order sampler, I think. Or no, actually, this might be the UK version, which includes tracks from the forthcoming album, Republic. And what you'll see actually is that, you know, the imagery has started to change on this. This has got Regret, Everyone Everywhere, and Spooky from Republic, alongside Bizarre Love Triangle, occasionally known as Bacon, Lettuce, Tomato, Perfect Kiss, Your Silent Face, and Dreams Will Never End. The London Records machine had gone into full thrust here. I should point out, Factory Records had gone bankrupt by this point, and New Order were faced in the position of not only not getting any of their royalties ever again, but having a finished album, which they could then shop around to the labels. This is a CD called Inorder. This is the American promo version, which is largely an airplay reminder of what New Order are all about. No new tracks on this, nothing off the Republic album, but just some nice promos. Again, picked this up many years ago at a record fair. I don't quite know why. The short answer is because I wanted it and I could afford it. But there it is. And after a New Order sampler, after Inorder, after Regret, came obviously the thing which I've been talking about all the way along, Republic. This is the limited edition American initial release, which has a limited run. I think there's 30,000 CDs of this. Came in an orange felt pack. It's designed to look like a car in a tyre, actually, and it's got a special different format CD which has got red rubber rings on the inside, which takes its kind of hint from the orange rubber rings on the cover of the Republic album. And this is the booklet that comes with that version. The booklet that comes with this version is printed on a plastic form of paper, so that it doesn't react negatively to the vinyl which they use in this sleeve. This is a lovely bit of work. I love them to do a vinyl version of this. It's a unique CD cover. I think the cover for this is phenomenal, and again, as I said, New Order's imagery at this point was incredibly strong, very brilliant visuals. You know, the fire, which is here, was cut out specifically to create almost like an individual brand identity. Really strong, very powerful. And I'm going to talk about the cover to the album. Actually, the first thing that most people saw of Republic, apart from regret, was this cover. Peter Saville, the band's designer, had moved to California and went through collections of stock photography for marketing purposes, and then selected various photographs which he was then going to use together. And the cover for Republic here clearly is a, you know, an image of the fall of Rome. That's what it's designed to do. It's designed to evince the fall of Rome, and the name Republic is also a clear indicator of the contents of the record. It's designed to show a certain political state of mind where perhaps it's not quite a democracy, but something a little bit different. Peter Saville's idea was actually, by putting these contrasting images together, is you were able to evince a picture or a vision of decadence and collapse at the same time. And that kind of shows itself on the cover here. And the inner sleeve is wonderfully prosaic. It's just some typography and some credits. This is an original London Records edition on centre date from 1993, not remastered. In those days, vinyl was fast dying on its arse, to put it technically, and the vast majority of people didn't really buy vinyl at all. But when we look inside the Republic CD sleeve, it kind of folds out to create a series of computer graphic images which almost portray like a triptych of imagery taken from that. So this cover here is the cover to the Spooky single. This cover here is the cover to the World single, and this one here is the cover to Regret. And again, the imagery is almost designed to be almost bland, almost corporate, but at the same point, you look at that imagery and you go, that's New Order. That's a New Order cover. It looks like New Order. It contains a certain essence of elegant New Orderness about it. Luckily, my copy of Republic here, even though it was made in the UK by PDO, does not yet have any of the disc bronzing and CD rots. I'd be bloody furious if it did. And yeah, as I said, the album doesn't sound like New Order. It sounds like the four members of New Order playing different songs at the same time in the same room. It sounds like four solo albums stuck together. It's a really strange experience listening to Republic, but I love it. It's got some great songs on it. It's got I especially like Chemical, which they've never played live, Special, which they've only played live once at the Roskilde Festival. And the album ends on a track called Avalanche, which is effectively kind of like a repurposed, remixed track from the other two album sessions. And it's just a set of tribal drums, distant vocals, and ancient guitar that somehow create the sense of almost like meditation or levitation. If you bought the album from a store called FNAC in France, you got this CD single, Regret, the Weatherall mixes. The only place to get the Andrew Weatherall mixes of this track on CD officially. The Sabres Slow and Low and the Sabres Fast and Throb mixes. I don't want to tell you how much I paid for it because I've forgotten. It was probably about £10. But FNAC frequently did in stores or exclusive CDs. This was one of them. Now, London Records really threw a lot of money at the band. They think, well, we've got the next big thing. We've got a band that could be as big as Depeche Mode, The Cure, U2. Here's a new album from them. And they're prepared to go out and tour and to plug the album. So there was that advance, which allegedly was £1 million. They did videos which were very expensive. The video for Ruined in a Day cost £200,000. The video for World cost £300,000. I mean, it's absurd amounts of money. Somebody got rich out of New Order, and it sure as heck wasn't some of the members of New Order, is probably the way to describe it. It was also backed up with this, an interview disc, which contains a full promo. In fact, New Order did the first band web chat on the internet when there was about 1 million people that were signed up to the internet, mostly on university servers, in 1993. And you could really see that that London were trying really, really hard to make the band more successful than they were prepared to be. So when in Peter Hook's book, he talks about it as the way in which the band was operating. Regret cost over £200,000. And he says, we were in a different league now, and we would soon realise that being on a major label making expensive, nonsensical videos was a great way to burn money. And this would be dwarfed by the next video, World. And so when talking about the album, Peter Hook says, Regret was okay, World, Spooky, Liar, Special and Chemical were a long way from the days when we used to take our titles from novels, from arty foreign films and the Sunday Times. Regret had done well in America, but man, I fucking hated World with a passion. I hated the name, I hated the song, I hated the backing vocals, and sure enough, I would hate the video. The crew were out in Cannes for 3 weeks to film a video, and it cost over £300,000. Yeah, man. What a waste of money. It really, really was. And the band didn't even back it up by playing live that much, really. He said, we didn't play live for long. Barney found Ruined in a Day too complicated to play, and it got bumped a lot off the set list alongside many others. So the total amount of touring that the band did for the Republic album was 13 shows, of which I think 4, maybe 5 were in Europe, and 8 or 9 were in America. I think the first show was in Dublin, a charity show at the Point. The band played for about 50 minutes in May. Then they played, I think, Roskilde, Montreux, and then they went to America, and then they ended it all with one solitary UK gig at the Reading Festival in August 1993. It seems, clearly the impression I get very, very strongly is that Bernard was doing it because it was a job and it was an obligation, and he felt that contractually he had to do it, and he didn't want to do it, and he didn't want to be there, and he didn't want to make the album. And if he was going to have to make an album, he was going to make the best album he could, but it wasn't an album that he wanted to make. And backing that up with 13 live shows really made London Records very, very annoyed at all. They spent an enormous amount of money on this band. If you include the advance plus the cost of the videos, we're talking well over £2 million. And the album probably didn't sell £2 million worth of albums. Maybe it did. I don't know. But it probably didn't. It probably lost London some money to start with. Therefore, the second single from the album was a double header of Regret and Ruined in a Day, which was released in some European territories. And Ruined in a Day wasn't released as a single in its own right, but it was in the UK. And this is where we went format crazy, kids, because there's lots and lots of versions of Ruined in a Day. There's a CD single, there's a second CD single, there's a cassette single, and there's a 12-inch single, and they've all got exclusive mixes on. This one is particularly weird. It's the only place where you can get the New Order version, the New Order mix of a B-side called Vicious Circle. And Vicious Circle is not that great, but it's clearly a leftover from the album sessions. If you want to get the Mike Haas mix of Vicious Circle, you have to get the CD single. If you want to get the truly atrocious and unlistenable Sly and Robbie remixes of Ruined in a Day, you have to buy this, the limited edition, with double CD, and as was frequently the case, it's a 2 CD set, so buy the another one and stick it in. And these remixes are terrible. There is no world in which Ruined in a Day or any New Order song is made better by having Sly and Robbie toasting over the top of it. This is probably one of the best CD singles of all time, by the way. The Reunited in a Day mix by K-Class is an absolute stone-dead classic of its era, and the ambient mix is gorgeous, as used as the intro to the live versions. of course, if you were paying really, really close attention to what the band was up to, on the 12-inch, which has 2 of the Sly and Robbie mixes and the K-Class mix, it also has a remix by Brothers in Rhythm of World called The Price of Dub, which you can't get on the World CD single. So that made me think, right, World is going to be the next single. And lo and behold, I was right. Sometimes I really don't want to be right. Like when I sat in Burger King and I was like, I'm never going to listen to a New Order album ever again. I didn't want to be right then. It took me many years to be wrong. But that's how it went. So the next and third single from the album is World. As mentioned before, here is the sleeve for World, which you will have seen on the inner sleeve to the album. This has got 4 mixes on it. It's got 2 remixes by Perfecto, and it's got a Brothers in Rhythm mix, and the 4th mix is by K-Class. They're all really, really great mixes of a fairly average track. The Perfecto mix of this is an absolute banger, and I love it to bits. This was released on Bank Holiday Monday, the 30th of August, I think, 1993, the day after New Order played the last show of their extensive 13-date world tour at the Reading Festival. And when they announced that they were going to play the Reading Festival and no other UK shows, I had this terrible, sad realisation that I was probably never going to get to see New Order, one of my favourite bands, live. The time when I was old enough and able to buy tickets to go and see them if they played a tour, if they played the NEC Arena, for example. And bearing in mind, I wasn't even 20 when they announced these shows. I was still a teenager. I was like, well, if they play the Birmingham NEC, I can come home for the day. I can see them at the Birmingham NEC. Surely they'll play the Birmingham NEC. You know, touring is going to make them money. And, you know, if they played Wembley Arena, I couldn't go and see them at Wembley Arena because I was 19 and I was a student. I didn't get any unemployment benefit. There was a war against intelligence, I think, that was being fought at that point against people that were smart. If you went to university, you couldn't get unemployment benefit. I'm sure you can't get unemployment benefit now if you're a student. But it was very clearly a way of punishing people for having ambition and wanting to go to university and wanting to have qualifications. How dare I not want to earn money? How dare I not want to have a job? How dare I want to think about things and to be intelligent and smart, be able to prove it and do a degree? No fun for me, which meant that I missed New Order in 1993 because not only did they only play 1 show in the UK in 1993, I couldn't bloody get to it anyway. Not that I'm jealous or bitter about it, I just know which political party I'm not voting for the rest of my life. Now, actually, no, World was released on the 23rd of August 1993, according to this sticker here on the back of a promotional CD of World, which I bought from an Oxfam on the 14th of April 2007. This is New Order CDJ3, which contains World and a bunch of other tracks, which is a bunch of other remixes of World. Then I've got 3 CD singles of World because London wanted their money and they wanted the album to be a hit and they wanted people to keep buying it. So there was a UK CD single with 4 tracks on, and this CD single is the first of the really obvious examples of PDO disc rot. I don't know if you can see this here. There was a company called PDO based in Preston that pressed CDs, and the fucking cheapskates used a lacquer that oxidised on contact or close proximity to some of the inks used in CD sleeves, which means if you have a CD that was pressed by PDO in Preston between 1989 and 1993, it is almost definitely unplayable. The oxidisation will eat through the rest of this disc over the next 50 years to the point that I will never be able to play it. What a waste of bloody money that was. I went without food to buy records, and their cheapskates sold me pieces of crap as a result. Of course, PDO had a disc replacement program, but that only worked for the really big CDs like Simply Red Stars album, which of course is absolute garbage, and they discontinued it in 2006. So unless you went and looked through the backs of all your CDs between 2000 and all your CDs that you bought from PDO, in the 90s, unless you went and looked through all of them, you probably didn't stand a chance of being able to get them. Here's another CD single of World with remixes by K-Class and Brothers in Rhythm. That's another garbage CD that's getting eaten by cheap fucking lacquers. Here's the American CD single of World, not manufactured by PDO, and look, it's not turning into a useless piece of garbage coaster. So thank you, PDO. I hate you. The fourth single from the album, after the band had split, released in December, is Spooky. Never played live by New Order. This is the only single that New Order have never played live, because the band had split up by the time it was released as a single, and it wasn't the best song on the album. It's pretty good, actually. I have seen it played live by Peter Hook in his solo years, which is odd because he doesn't really like the track. But it's got some fantastic remixes on, and the remixes contain a whole bunch of extra and unused bass takes. So once again, produced by those awful shysters, PDO, and therefore the disc is absolutely just falling away and flaking away on there. This CD single contains 3 versions by an act called Fluke. This CD single contains another 5 versions remixed by various people, including Tony Garcia, Paul Van Dyke, and yeah, those two, that'll do. But this is again manufactured by PDO, and lo and behold, it's being eaten by terrible disc lacquers. I hate PDO. You are shysters and scumbags for doing this. This is a bootleg CD of New Order, Electronic Ecstasy, taken from the radio broadcast of the last show at the Reading Festival in August 1993. This is as good as a live album as you will ever hear. It's hard to find and harder to afford, but it contains the BBC broadcast of 1 hour of the show, Ruined in a Day, Regret, Round and Round, World, Broken Promise is not that cool as it is when it was, Everyone Everywhere, True Faith, Temptation, Perfect Kiss, Fine Time, Blue Monday. I bought this from a record fair in 1994 in Brighton. I have not stopped listening to it ever since. If there was one place in the world I wanted to be in late August 1993, it was that bloody field in Reading. And it's my eternal regret that I wasn't able to do it. But with that, that was it. End of New Order. Over. Sorry, mate. Tough. And here is the 12-inch single for Spooky. Now, what happened after that? Well, got pretty interesting because there wasn't a New Order, and yet there was a whole amount of money that was owed by New Order to London Records because they'd spent over £2 million in it. And what I do remember is Peter Hook did an interview where he was talking about the end of the band, and he said I was in the mixing desk, and I was finalising the mix for the radio broadcast of the Electronic Ecstasy Reading show for the BBC Radio 1, and he says, oh, I was crying because I knew I'd never play those songs again. I felt that was it, really. It was a terrible moment, actually, to be a New Order fan for me, is to have loved a band so deeply and so much, and to have had so much joy through listening to them, and then to effectively have been told, that's it, they're over. And I thought, I'm never going to get to see New Order. I'm never going to get to see this band that I've loved for a decade. They only played one UK show between August 1989 and July 1998. So that was the only show that they played in the UK for 9 years. And I just couldn't get there. I just couldn't afford it. It's about the money. There was a powerful essay by J.K. Rowling, which, irrespective of any opinions that we might have about J.K. Rowling, where she talks about it's, she repeats it in a very persuasive fashion and says, it's not about whether you can afford it, it's just about the money. If you don't have the money, you just don't have the money. And that is the way it was. Instead, I consoled myself on the Sunday night when I should have been watching New Order at Reading by recording off ITV the TV broadcast of this documentary for the South Bank show, New Order Story, of which a 60-minute version was broadcast on British television the night of New Order's only UK show for 9 years. Absolutely typical, but there you are. A 2.25 hour extended version of it was later released on home retail to VHS, and then later released as a DVD here. which is directed by Kevin Hewitt and produced by Paul Morley, and sort of a slightly sanitised trip through the band's career from 1977, when they first met Peter Hook and Bernard Sumner at a gig, through to August 1993. It was probably the last big era for New Order as a major chart-troubling entity. I think Regret was the last top 5 UK single that they had. Republic sold very, very healthily. It sold a lot of copies. But New Order then were just another band in the machine. They were an investment. They were a band that the record label expected to have a return on that investment. And by splitting up in late 1993, London Records probably felt cheated by their investment. And they said, well, where's the next album? Where's the next money coming from? What are you going to do about recouping the money which we've advanced to you? Well, the next thing that happened was released in late 1994. It was the best of New Order. And because I've only got about 5 minutes left before I run out of energy, I think it's probably best if I stop here and I pick up the best of New Order and the solo years, 1996 to 1999, in another instalment of Mark Talks About All of His Records. Besides, I think Line of Duty is finished now, so it's probably safe for me to go downstairs. In order to fit in, I might have to start talking about AC12 and Mother of God and all that type of stuff, and Crooked Bastards, etc., and Bent Coppers and Dirty Old Secrets and that type of thing. But that's it, really. So Republic is an album that I really love. This album, it has a lot of memories to me, this album. I remember both the joy of being able to have New Order material, to hear a band I love playing again, and also, the sadness of knowing that I'll probably never see New Order play live. I think probably is the active word in there, because times change. And even though this is a great album, and to me, it actually reminds me a lot of the Cure's Faith album, a kind of sense of desolation, despair, anger, and as I've kind of said, stubborn defeat, almost as if the fight has left the band, and this is almost the band writing their own funeral. But it wasn't the end. As I've said, the next time I talk about New Order, I'll talk about the best of New Order, and what happened after that. But in the meantime, I'm going to wrap up here, and I hope you're well, and I hope to see you soon. Okay, bye everyone.